Have you ever experienced a moment when just one sentence could change your entire life? I had that moment on a Tuesday morning, sitting in a black leather chair at a downtown Chicago bank branch, holding a folder that contained 40 years of my life. 40 years of work reduced to a few pages of statements, numbers, and one transfer order worth $450,000, my entire life savings. My name is Ann Miller, 61 years old. Until that day, I believed that being a mother meant giving everything, even when your child trampled your dignity without a hint of remorse. For decades, I thought maternal love was unconditional, that children would always value and protect it. I was wrong. When my phone buzzed, I saw my only son's name, Daniel. I had raised him alone after my husband, John, passed away when Daniel was 9. My heart beat faster, not out of worry but because it was rare for him to reach out first. Since marrying Emily, our conversations had grown distant and shallow, like when someone only remembers you when they need something. The message read, "Mom, about Emily's birthday dinner tomorrow night at Maple and Vine. Please don't come. Emily doesn't want you there. You make people uncomfortable. It's best if you don't show up." I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words didn't change, but my mind went blank. At that very moment, I was sitting across from the bank manager, about to transfer $450,000 to complete the purchase of a luxury condo in Northridge, Daniel and Emily's dream home. And right as I was signing the papers, my son sent a message telling me I wasn't welcome in the very family I had helped build. The irony was so bitter it was almost laughable. I was about to hand over every dollar I had ever saved to secure his home while being erased from his life. "Are you all right, Mrs. Miller?" Gerald, the bank manager, asked when he saw my face go pale. I wasn't all right, but something inside me cracked open. For the first time, I understood the difference between being a mother and being a doormat. "May I make a phone call?" I asked, stepping into the private area. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed, not from fear, but from a slow-burning anger rising inside me. Daniel picked up. "Hey, Mom, you got my message, right?" His tone was light, as if crossing his mother's name off the guest list was nothing unusual. "I did, son," I replied. "I just wanted to be sure I understood it correctly." "Oh, Mom, don't be upset. Emily's just stressed. You know how she is. She's a perfectionist, and tomorrow she's hosting some important people, coworkers, clients. She just wants everything to be perfect." Perfect meaning a dinner without the mother who spent 30 years teaching school, then opened a small craft shop to pay for her son's tuition. "So I make things less perfect?" I asked quietly. "No, it's not like that, Mom. She's just afraid you'll feel out of place. Everyone there's from a different background, a different status." I repeated his words slowly. "A different status. And which one do I belong to in your eyes, Daniel? Mom, don't turn this into a big deal. Emily comes from a traditional family. They have a certain way of living, and you're just simpler." Simpler. That word again, the polite way of making me feel small. "Don't worry, son, I understand," I said. "Great. I knew you would. We can do lunch Sunday. Just the 3 of us, quiet and easy. A safe lunch with the embarrassing mother. All right then. Goodbye, Daniel." I hung up and sat still, watching people rush in and out of the bank, each busy with their own plans. And there I was, about to give away my life's work to a son who saw me as an inconvenience. But something changed in that moment. It felt like a fog I'd lived under for years finally lifted. I realized my worth existed only when my wallet was open. I went back to Gerald's desk, mind clearer than ever. "I've changed my mind." "Cancel the transfer." He looked stunned. "Ma'am, Everything's ready. The sellers are waiting. It's a large amount, $450,000. Cancel it. Are you sure? There may be penalties for withdrawing. I'm absolutely sure. May I ask why? He said. I smiled. Because I just realized I deserve more respect than this. As he turned to his keyboard, my thoughts drifted to the past, Daniel, as a little boy, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I graded papers late into the night. The nights I stayed up crafting handmade items to sell just to cover his school fees, the weekends I skipped rest to earn enough for his English classes. I remembered all the dinners I declined, the movies I never watched, the dresses I never bought, all so my son would never feel deprived. "Mom, when I grow up, I'll take care of you," he once told me at 10, seeing me exhausted after a long day of teaching and sewing late into the night. "You don't have to, sweetheart," I had said. "Just love me, and that's enough." I was naive. I thought love meant gratitude, respect, understanding. For him, love was politeness between one bill and the next. "It's done, Mrs. Miller," Gerald said. "The transfer's canceled. Your money's safe." "Thank you." I left the bank feeling strange, not quite relieved, not sad either, but as if I'd finally woken from a long sleep where I'd been used without knowing. In the car, I sat for a moment, then texted Daniel, "It's all right, son. Enjoy the dinner." Short, calm, no anger, no explanation. Just acceptance that I was only welcome when money was involved. Driving home, I thought about all the signs I'd ignored, his visits becoming rare, the family gatherings I wasn't invited to, the conversations that made me feel like an outsider. I remembered last Christmas, when I brought an entire homemade feast I'd spent 2 days preparing, and Emily opened the door saying, "Oh, Mrs. Miller, you shouldn't have. We already ordered catering. Now we'll have too much food." As if my love, too, had an expiration date. Or the time Daniel introduced me to a colleague. "This is my mom. She runs a small craft shop." Not the single mother who raised me with her own hands. Just a small shop, enough to erase every sacrifice. That quiet dismissal had chipped away at me like water eroding stone. First, "Mom, that place isn't really your style." Then, "Mom, that restaurant's pretty upscale." And finally, "Mom, you make people uncomfortable." When I got home, I sat on the porch, the same spot where John used to read the paper every Sunday morning. If he were alive, what would he say? Probably that I'd endured too much for too long. He used to warn me, "Anne, you've got a kind heart, but don't let anyone use it against you." He'd always known my weakness, that I mistook love for endless tolerance. He tried to teach me that self-respect was part of love, but I thought that was selfish. Now I understood the line between kindness and foolishness, and I had crossed it long ago. The phone rang. It was Daniel. He must have already heard from the real estate office. "Mom," the company called. "They said the transfer was canceled. Must have been a bank error." "Not an error, Daniel." Silence filled the line. "What do you mean, not an error?" "I canceled it." "You did what? Why?" "Because I changed my mind." "Mom, that's ridiculous." "We already planned everything, the house, the furniture, even the curtains Emily picked out. Your plans, Daniel, not mine. But you promised to help, and I have helped for 30 years. Now I'm tired. Tired of what? Tired of being treated like a problem to fix instead of a mother to respect. The silence on his end told me he understood exactly what I meant. He knew that his text and my decision were connected. "Mom, the dinner thing has nothing to do with this. They're separate." "No, Daniel, they're the same. They're both about how you see me, how you treat me. We treat you fine. No, you tolerate me. That's not the same thing. You're being unfair. Unfair is getting a message that I'm excluded from my own family on the same day I was about to give away my life savings for your new home. But those two things aren't related. They are. They're both about respect, gratitude, and dignity. I didn't know then that canceling that transfer would only be the beginning, the start of a story far more complicated, filled with betrayal, shocking discoveries, and consequences I never imagined I'd be strong enough to orchestrate. A few weeks later, I learned something about my son that shattered everything I thought I knew about him and about myself. No longer burdened by the illusion of devotion from those who disrespected me, no longer pressured to be the perfect mother who gives endlessly without ever being seen. The next morning, I woke with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in decades. The following day, Daniel called non-stop. I let every call go to voicemail. I needed silence to process what had happened and what it meant for my future. By late afternoon, Emily's messages began arriving. Polite at first, then frantic. "Mrs. Miller, can we talk? There must be some misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? Cutting your mother-in-law out of your family, that's a misunderstanding?" Days passed, then weeks. The calls faded. I returned to work at my small craft shop, Golden Hands, where I had turned my passion into a living after retiring from teaching. My best friend, Linda, who owns the bakery next door, was the only one I confided in. "You did the right thing, Anne," she said one Saturday morning over coffee. "It's about time they learned you're not an ATM on legs." At the end of that month, I received an unexpected call, not from Daniel or Emily, but from Gerald, the bank manager. "Mrs. Miller, I need to see you in person. It's a delicate matter. I can't discuss it over the phone." His tone made me uneasy. We scheduled for Monday morning. When I arrived, instead of taking our usual seats, I was ushered into a private conference room. Gerald was already there with a woman in a gray suit who introduced herself as Mariana from internal auditing. "Mrs. Miller," she began gently, "what I'm about to say isn't easy, but I need your full attention." My heart raced. I assumed it had to do with the canceled transfer, maybe a fee or some policy issue. "After you canceled the $450,000 transaction, our security system triggered a standard review," Gerald explained carefully. "We discovered an unusual withdrawal pattern, small, regular transactions every month for 5 years. Withdrawals? But I haven't taken out any money." "Exactly. That's what's strange," Mariana said, sliding a folder toward me. "We found transfers of about $2,000 each month to a business account, all bearing your signature." I opened the folder and stared at dozens of forms, each with a signature that looked almost identical to mine. Almost. The differences were subtle, but there. "That's not my handwriting." "We know," Gerald said. "Our handwriting specialists confirmed their forgeries, sophisticated, but still fake." "What does that mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "It means someone with access to your banking information has been quietly withdrawing money for years, totaling around $120,000. I could hardly breathe. The room seemed to disintegrate. Spin. Where did the money go? Mariana slid over another paper. "To a business account named Preston Architecture and Design, opened 5 years ago. Preston, Emily's maiden name. The company she proudly claimed to have built from scratch. Does your son have access to your account?" "Not officially," I said, "but he used to come with me to the bank. He knows everything, the account details, the paperwork." They exchanged a look, and Gerald said quietly, "By policy, we're required to report this to the authorities." but since it involves family, I can give you 48 hours before we file." I left the bank on unsteady legs, my heart sinking. Not just because of the money, though $120,000 was a huge part of what I had worked for, but because of the betrayal, a deliberate theft, carried out for years. My own son, the boy who once promised to take care of me, had been forging my name to send money to his wife. I drove to Grant Park without thinking, just needing air. Sitting on a bench overlooking the lake, I let the tears fall not out of sadness but fury, a deep, raw anger I'd never felt before. My phone rang. "Anne, where are you?" Linda's voice asked. I stopped by the shop. "Your clerk said you weren't there." "Linda, could you meet me by the lake? I need you." Less than an hour later, she was sitting beside me, quietly listening as I told her everything. When I finished, she took my hand. "What are you going to do?" A simple question, yet heavy. Take it to the police? Maybe. But I knew how that would end, Daniel fined, Emily pretending innocence, and me becoming the pitied mother who turned in her own son. "I think I'm going to teach them a lesson," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "What kind of lesson?" "I don't know yet, but one they'll never forget." In the days that followed, an eerie calm took over me. I called Gerald and asked for one more week before he filed the report. "I'll handle it myself," I told him. He hesitated, then agreed. That entire week, I studied everything about Emily's company clients, projects, finances. I visited their small office in Lincoln Park, observed their routines, tracked their debts and contracts. Knowledge is power, and I was gathering every piece of it. On the fourth day, I met Mr. Lawrence Barnes. He walked into my shop looking for a retirement gift for his secretary. "I want something that shows appreciation and dedication," he said. While helping him choose, I learned he was a corporate and criminal attorney, a perfect coincidence. When he paid, he handed me his business card. "If you ever need legal advice, I'd be happy to help. You have a wonderful store." I slipped the card into my pocket. That evening, while writing out my plan, I realized I needed someone like him to make sure everything I was about to do stayed within the law. The next day, I called Mr. Barnes and set up a meeting. After I explained my situation, he said, "What you're planning isn't conventional, but if we handle it correctly, it won't break any laws. We'll make sure you're protected." With his guidance, I prepared 3 documents: a detailed report of the embezzlement, a written confession of complicity, and a transfer agreement assigning full ownership of Preston Architecture and Design to me. Everything was executed legally, even if the path there wasn't exactly moral. The next step was the invitation. I called Daniel on a Thursday evening after 2 weeks of silence. "It's Mom." He sounded surprised. "Mom, are you okay? I've been worried. You just disappeared." "I'm fine. I just needed time to think things through." "I understand," he said carefully, as if stepping on thin ice. "I've thought about everything, the apartment, all of it," I told him. "Maybe I overreacted. I want to talk to you and Emily in person. Maybe we can start over." His voice softened, relief seeping in. "Of course, Mom. Whenever you want, we can come to your place, or you can come over to ours." "Actually," I said, "I think we should meet somewhere neutral. Maybe dinner. At Maple and Vine, I remember that's Emily's favorite place." There was a short silence. He must have caught the irony in my suggestion, the very restaurant where they once told me not to come. But the thought of regaining the money for the apartment must have outweighed his discomfort. "That's perfect, Mom. Emily will love that." "Good. I'll make the reservation for Saturday night." "Thank you for reconsidering, Mom." I hung up. feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. My only son was about to face the truth, but there was no turning back. Some wounds run too deep for forgiveness. 2 days later, every detail of the plan was ready. I booked a quiet corner table at Maple and Vine, worked with Lawrence to finalize the paperwork, and rehearsed every word I would say. I asked Linda, my closest friend, and the one who knew everything, to be nearby in case I needed support afterward. That Saturday night, I dressed neatly, not to impress, but to feel strong. I chose a dark blue dress with a simple cut, the silver earrings my late husband John had given me on our last anniversary, and a soft red lipstick. I wasn't dressing up for them. I was dressing for battle. I arrived 20 minutes early. The waiter led me to the reserved table in the corner, overlooking the gardens sparkling with string lights. At 8 p.m. sharp, I saw Daniel and Emily walk in. He was punctual, as always, a habit I had taught him since he was little. I watched as they approached. Daniel looked tense, but tried to appear hopeful. Emily smiled perfectly, but her eyes were cold. She wore a fitted black dress, delicate jewelry that I knew for certain had been bought with my money. "Mom!" Daniel hugged me tightly. "It's wonderful to see you again, Mrs. Miller," Emily said, shaking my hand politely. "You look lovely tonight." "Thank you, both of you do too." We sat down and ordered drinks. I asked for a glass of red wine, something I rarely drank, but tonight I needed courage. At first, the conversation was stiff. They talked about the weather, the food, small talk. I deliberately avoided mentioning money or the apartment, letting them grow uneasy on their own. After the main course was cleared, Daniel finally spoke. "Mom, about the apartment. We wanted to say we understand your reaction. That text was awful. The timing was bad. We're really sorry." Emily chimed in. "Yes, Mrs. Miller, it was my fault. I was stressed about everything and spoke without thinking. Of course, you're always welcome in our home." "I understand," I said calmly, taking a sip of wine. "Everyone makes mistakes." Daniel took a deep breath. About the apartment deal, the developer agreed to reinstate the contract with only a small penalty. "But actually," I interrupted gently, "I've thought about it, and I've decided to help you both buy the house." Their faces lit up, visible relief washing over them. "Mom, that's wonderful. I don't know how to thank you. It matters to me too," I smiled. Family is still family. I reached into my purse and pulled out a black folder. "I also brought a few papers, so everything is clear this time." Daniel frowned slightly. "Mom, that's not necessary. We can just go to the bank." "It's just a draft," I said. "So everyone understands the terms before we involve the bank." A simple agreement between us. I laid 3 contracts on the table. They're straightforward. They outline my contribution and your responsibilities. My lawyer, Mr. Lawrence Barnes, helped me prepare them. Emily's brow furrowed. "You have a lawyer?" "There's a lot you don't know about me," I said, smiling slightly. "Just read carefully and sign, then we can process the transfer on Monday." Daniel skimmed through the pages, his usual habit whenever money was involved. Emily read slower, though I could tell she wasn't paying attention to details either, only the outcome. "Everything looks fine," Daniel said, picking up the pen. "Are you sure you've read it properly?" I asked. "There are a few special clauses about what happens if the agreement is broken." "Mom, I trust you." Those words stabbed me. I had once trusted him too, and he had betrayed me for 5 years. Daniel signed all 3 copies and handed them to Emily. She hesitated for a moment, then signed as well. I placed the folder carefully into my bag. "Good," I said, taking a breath. "Now we can talk for real. "What do you mean, Mom?" Daniel asked, the smile fading from his face. I pulled out another folder, a red one. "You just signed 3 very percent. Interesting documents," I said evenly. "The first one, Daniel, is a confession detailing how you forged my signature for 5 years to withdraw about $120,000, transferring it into Emily's company." His smile disappeared. Emily's face turned pale. "The second document," I continued, "is your signed statement, Emily, confirming that you knew the origin of the funds and agreed to use them to start your architecture firm. What are you talking about?" She stammered. "And the third document," I said, "is the transfer of full ownership of Preston Architecture and Design to me, effective immediately." I opened the red folder and spread out copies of forged transfer slips, bank statements, and handwriting verification reports. "Tonight, we're not celebrating submission," I said, looking straight at them. "We're celebrating my freedom. The bank discovered everything after I canceled the apartment transfer. A routine audit exposed it all." Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came. Emily began to cry. "Mom, this is some kind of joke, right? If it's a joke, son, then you started it 5 years ago when you began stealing from me. Or maybe when you and your wife excluded me from a party paid for with my own money." "Mom, I can explain. There's no explanation for betrayal." I cut him off. "Only consequences." I finished my wine and set the glass down gently. "Now you have 2 choices. 1, I take these documents to the police. Tomorrow, you'll both be charged with fraud, forgery, and theft. With that amount and that time span, Daniel, you could go to prison." "What's the second option?" Emily asked, trembling. "You do exactly what you just signed. Daniel, you forfeit your inheritance, repay every dollar you stole, leave Chicago, and end all contact with me. Emily, you transfer the company to my name immediately. No disputes, no delays." Silence filled the table. Daniel looked 10 years older. Emily sobbed, hatred flickering behind her tears. "It's up to you," I said, standing up and laying money for my part of the bill on the table. "You have 24 hours. After that, the file goes to the police." "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked, "how could you do this?" I looked him straight in the eye, not with the gaze of a blind, loving mother, but with the clarity of someone who finally saw the truth. "No, Daniel. The real question is, how could you do this to me? I gave you everything, my time, my love, my money, and you betrayed me." Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Outside, the Chicago sky was crystal clear. I took a long breath. The plan was complete. All I had to do now was wait to see which path they would choose. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of a much deeper change, that the real reckoning wasn't about exposing them, but about rediscovering myself in ways I'd never imagined. The next morning, before I even finished brewing my coffee, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We accept your conditions. Please don't report us. Short, no excuses. No pleas, just surrender from 2 people who had cornered themselves." I set the phone down and lay still, staring at the ceiling where John and I had shared 16 years of our lives. A strange feeling washed over me. Not joy, not relief, but a deep, quiet peace, the kind that comes when a new chapter begins. Maybe it was a mix of sorrow and resolve. "So what now, John?" I whispered into the stillness, as if my late husband could answer. "What do I do with a victory that tastes this bitter?" There was no going back. The plan was done, the papers signed, and a new phase of my life was about to begin, one I had never envisioned. On Monday morning, I met with Lawrence at his downtown Chicago office, a sleek glass building that reflected the city skyline. He shook my hand, calm but sharp-eyed. "So they agreed to the terms," he said as he sat behind his large wooden desk. "I'm not surprised. The alternative was far worse for them. What do we do next?" I asked, feeling strangely empty despite the triumph. "Now we carry out every clause carefully," he said, opening the folder. "First, the company transfer. I've scheduled the notarization for tomorrow morning. Emily must be present. She'll be there," I said firmly. The fear of public exposure would ensure her compliance. Next, the repayment. $120,000 is a lot. I doubt they can pay it all at once. "I've planned for that," I said. "The contract includes a 24-month repayment plan." "Good. And leaving the city?" "I gave them 30 days, enough time to relocate." Lawrence studied me for a moment. "Mrs. Miller, I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've seen families destroyed for far less. Are you sure you want to sever all ties with your son? You still have time to reconsider." I went silent. Was I truly ready to cut the last thread connecting me to my only child? The answer came clear, painful, and final. When I discovered the embezzlement, I realized that was just the surface. The real betrayal started long before, when my son began treating his mother like a bank, not family. Some wounds never heal. Lawrence nodded without argument. "I understand. Then let's make sure your rights are fully protected." In the following days, everything unfolded exactly as planned. The transfer of the company was completed at a notary office downtown. Emily showed up in a black dress, as if attending a funeral. Maybe she was, the funeral of her ambitions. She didn't meet my eyes as she signed the papers, transferring full ownership of the company to me. The first repayment arrived on time. Daniel set up automatic monthly transfers to avoid speaking to me again. By the third week, I received an email with their new address in a small Midwestern town, a few hundred miles from Chicago. Daniel had taken a job at a small construction firm, earning far less. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness, as if I had won a war but was still fighting a deeper battle, one against my lifelong habit of putting everyone else before myself. That Friday evening, as Linda and I were closing our shops, she looked at me and asked bluntly, "So what now, Anne? You gonna sit around staring at clouds for the rest of your life? Or do something with that company that just fell into your lap?" I hesitated. Do something? I don't know anything about architecture or interior design. "So what? You know business. You built your craft shop from scratch. Now you have the money to hire the right people. Why not use it to start over, to continue a business that was built with stolen money?" Linda rolled her eyes, her voice firm. "No, silly. To turn it into something entirely new, something that belongs to you." That sentence planted a seed in my mind. A few days later, I began to see the company not as a symbol of betrayal anymore, but as a new opportunity. The next morning, I went to the company's office for the first time as its owner. It was a small but beautiful building in Lincoln Park. A young secretary named Rachel greeted me with visible unease. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Emily left all the files you requested." "Thank you. How long have you been working here?" "Almost 3 years, ma'am." "Do you like your job?" She hesitated. "I do, but I'm a little worried about the changes." "That's understandable." I looked around at the walls covered with photos of luxury design projects. Who are the company's main clients? Mostly luxury apartments, villas, and townhouses for the upper class on the north side. What about community projects or affordable housing designs? Rachel's eyes widened. We've never done that kind of work. I see. All morning, I reviewed the client list, ongoing projects, and the company's finances. It was smaller than I had imagined, but still profitable and full of potential. Everything looked elegant but lacked heart, the kind of cold beauty meant for people with money. When I went out for lunch, I walked down the street and saw the cramped temporary housing blocks in the distance, a stark contrast to the luxurious drawings I had just reviewed. In that moment, the idea began to form. What if I turned this company into something completely different? A business that still served wealthy clients, but used part of its resources to help those who needed it most, creating affordable housing designs, functional living spaces, and offering training for underprivileged youth. I went back to the office, called Rachel in, and said directly, I plan to restructure the entire company. We'll keep our current projects, but our future direction will be completely different. Different how? She asked. A company that balances profit with social impact, creating accessible design for the community, consulting on housing for low-income families, and opening architecture training programs for young people. Rachel looked at me for a long moment, then smiled softly. Honestly, that's why I studied architecture in the first place. I only worked on luxury projects because there were no other options. So, you'll stay? Yes, and I know a few others who share the same vision. In the following weeks, I threw myself into work. I hired 2 young architects recommended by Rachel, talented and passionate about social projects. I asked Lawrence for legal advice and studied business models that combined profit with community contribution. The old company name had to go. It carried too much darkness. After much thought, I chose a new one: New Spaces, Architecture and Social Transformation. The new logo was designed by a young student from the city's South Side, modern, yet full of human warmth. Linda, with a lifetime of business experience, became my most trusted partner. One afternoon, while we were talking in my kitchen, she said, "You need a launch event, something that proves this isn't the same company anymore. It's a new beginning. I don't know if I'm ready." "You are, and it has to be big. Invite the media, reporters, community leaders, let people see you're serious." The thought scared me a little, but she was right. I needed to do this not just to promote the company, but to mark my own rebirth. We chose to hold the event in a month, enough time to prepare, but not long enough for me to back out. The event would take place right at the company headquarters, fully renovated to reflect our new vision. During preparations, a bold idea came to me. I sent formal invitations to Daniel and Emily. "Are you sure?" Lawrence asked. "That's a bit provocative." "No," I said. "It's a statement. I want them to see that from the ashes of betrayal I can build something good. That the money they once took is now serving a higher purpose." He didn't approve, but he respected my decision. The week of the event passed like a whirlwind. Renovations finished just in time. The catering team was hired from a culinary training program for disadvantaged youth. The guest list grew longer than expected, including many curious about the 61-year-old woman making waves in Chicago's architecture scene with a new vision. A local TV station even requested a live interview during the event. "You'll do great," Linda reassured me. "Just speak from the heart." On the morning of the event, I woke before dawn. Sitting on my porch, I watched the city slowly wake and thought about how far I had come from a retired teacher pitied by her own son to a woman launching a company with a social mission. From victim to leader, I chose a blue suit I had bought especially for that day, not to impress, but to feel steady and confident. I put on small silver earrings and light makeup. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, not because of how she looked, but because of the energy radiating from her, a mix of strength and calm I had never felt before. The launch event was in the evening, and I arrived several hours early to oversee the final preparations. The office looked completely transformed. The white walls were replaced with vibrant colors, adorned with paintings by community artists and boards showcasing our social projects. One corner displayed models created by public school students during their workshops with our architects. As guests began to arrive, journalists, architects, representatives from social organizations, and industry professionals, Rachel and my new team moved around the room, presenting the company's vision, exchanging cards, and building connections. While speaking with a representative from the Department of Housing Development, I saw Daniel and Emily walk in. They looked tense and out of place, as if they had stepped into a world that no longer belonged to them. We met eyes briefly, and I gave a small nod. No words were needed. At 8 p.m. sharp, the reporter from the local TV station approached for the live interview. We stood in front of a large board bearing the company's new logo. The lights came on, the camera focused on me. The reporter smiled. "We're here tonight with Mrs. Ann Miller, founder of New Spaces, a Chicago-based architecture firm with a completely unique model. Mrs. Miller, could you share what inspired you to combine commercial projects with social programs?" I took a deep breath and looked straight into the camera, knowing Daniel and Emily were watching from the audience. This idea was born from a profound change in my own life. At 61, I learned that it's never too late to start over. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most beautiful beginnings. I saw Daniel's face go pale. The reporter leaned forward, intrigued. "Betrayal? Could you elaborate?" "Let's just say I acquired this company under unexpected circumstances," I replied calmly. And instead of continuing a model focused only on profit and prestige, I wanted to turn it into something that truly matters to the community. I spoke about our mission to democratize architecture, to create dignified spaces for those often overlooked. I mentioned our first project renovating a daycare center in the suburbs and explained that all company profits would go toward establishing a foundation called the Rebirth Foundation, dedicated to helping mothers rebuild their lives after hardship. When the interview ended, I looked around for Daniel and Emily. They were quietly leaving. When our eyes met, I saw not just fear or shame in my son's eyes, but the bitter realization that I hadn't just survived betrayal, I had turned it into something far greater than either of us. Linda came up beside me, gently taking my hand. I whispered, "Revenge isn't just a dish best served cold. It's a feast meant to nourish an entire community. That night wasn't just the launch of a company, it was the moment I was reborn. A woman who had learned that self-love isn't selfish, it's the foundation of every other kind of love. I had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into legacy. 6 months after New Spaces launched, everything had changed both for the company and for me. What began as an act of retaliation had evolved into something much bigger, with a life of its own that even I hadn't foreseen. The TV segment created a strong buzz. The following week, I received interview requests from newspapers, magazines, and even a podcast about midlife women entrepreneurs. My story, or rather, the simplified version I shared publicly, resonated deeply with people. The image of a 61-year-old woman rebuilding her life after an unnamed betrayal became a source of comfort for countless others. "You've become a symbol of strength and renewal," one journalist told me. I had never thought of myself that way. All my life, I had been the one who yielded, who understood, who put others first. Now, I was seen as someone who fought back. New spaces grew naturally, attracting both commercial clients and social partnerships. Rachel proved to be an exceptional manager, handling day-to-day operations, while I became the face and guiding vision of the company. Our first major achievement was completing the daycare project, transforming a makeshift space into a bright, safe, and inspiring environment. On the opening day, when I saw the children laughing and running around their new classrooms, I broke into tears. One teacher took my hand and said, "Mrs. Miller, you have no idea how much this means to us. These kids have never had a place truly made for them." I smiled through my tears. I had changed their lives with the same money that was once meant to buy Daniel and Emily a luxury apartment. Life, it seemed, had its own sense of irony. As the company continued to grow, I began working with Lawrence to formally establish the Rebirth Foundation. He guided me through the maze of legal requirements. "We need to clearly define its scope," he said. "Who will this foundation serve? How will it operate? And what resources will sustain it?" Those questions forced me to think deeply about my purpose. After many discussions with psychologists and social workers, we agreed that the foundation would support women over 50, those rebuilding their lives after major life upheavals such as divorce, widowhood, abandonment, or financial ruin. "There are so many programs that help young women start over," I told Lawrence, "but very few that focus on older women, who not only face financial hardship, but also the weight of age discrimination and the belief that it's too late to begin again." The foundation would not only provide financial assistance, but also create a comprehensive network: legal counseling, psychological support, vocational training, business mentorship, and, in some cases, temporary housing. One Wednesday afternoon, while we were discussing possible locations for the foundation's headquarters, an idea struck me something Linda later called a poetic masterstroke. I said, "What if I use the money Daniel has been paying back to buy the same apartment he and Emily once wanted and turn it into the foundation's headquarters?" Lawrence laughed. "You really do have a poetic sense of justice, Mrs. Miller. I contacted the real estate company that same week. By some strange coincidence, the apartment was still available. I immediately began negotiations with my own legitimate money, earned honestly. 3 months later, everything was finalized. The monthly payments Daniel sent became part of the fund that bought the apartment he had once dreamed of owning. There was something beautifully symmetrical about that. On the day I signed the ownership papers, the sky was crystal clear. I walked out of the notary's office with a deep sense of satisfaction, not just for settling an emotional debt, but for beginning something truly meaningful. I strolled through the nearby park, watching the city gleam in the sunlight, filled with gratitude and amazement at how life can turn itself around. Transforming the apartment into the headquarters of the Rebirth Foundation became New Space's next major project. By then, our team had grown to 5 architects and 2 interior designers, all working with contagious enthusiasm. I told them, "We're not creating a place that looks like a support center, we're building a space for rebirth. These women aren't seeking pity. They're seeking a chance to regain their dignity." We chose a modern design infused with the warmth of home. The space would be flexible for one-on-one counseling, workshops, and skills training. The rooftop was turned into a healing garden where women could tend to plants and witness new life take root. Over the 3 months of construction, I personally interviewed every member of the team who would work at the foundation, from lawyers and psychologists to financial advisors. I wanted people not only skilled, but compassionate. Most of them were women who, like me, had once started over. "Why did you decide to do this?" asked Gloria, a 58-year-old psychologist, during her interview. "Have you ever had to start over yourself?" I paused for a moment, then replied, "I discovered that my only son had deceived me and stolen my money on the very day I was about to transfer all my life savings to buy him an apartment." Gloria didn't show pity, only understanding, her eyes soft but knowing. When she asked how I managed to turn such pain into something positive, I simply smiled. By refusing to be a victim in my own story, I chose to rewrite the ending. She nodded. "That's exactly what we need to teach other women to do." The grand opening of the Rebirth Foundation was held on a date full of meaning, exactly 1 year after the night Daniel texted me, telling me not to come to Emily's birthday dinner. 1 year that had changed everything. We planned a formal ceremony with city officials, women's organizations, and media representatives. I wanted women across America to know that it is never too late to begin again. The day before the opening, I received an unexpected call from the state where Daniel was living. "Mom," his voice was rough and tired. "It's me." My heart tightened. We hadn't spoken since that night at the restaurant almost a year ago. "Hello, Daniel. I read about your foundation at the apartment Emily and I were going to buy." "That's right. The opening is tomorrow." There was a long silence. I waited without prompting. "I'd like to come," he said finally. "I just want to see for myself what you've turned all this into." I hadn't expected that. Of all the possibilities I had ever imagined for my son, this one had never crossed my mind. "Why?" I asked. "Because I need to understand how you turned our tragedy into something bigger than both of us." I thought for a moment. I had never planned to let him attend such an important day. But maybe there was meaning in letting him witness the outcome of his own betrayal. "You can come," I said, "as a regular guest. No special attention, and Emily must not be with you." "We're no longer together," he said quietly. 4 months ago. She said she couldn't live with a man who had lost everything: money, status, and his mother. Part of me felt satisfied. Emily had finally shown her true colors. But another part, the mother still inside me, felt a faint ache of sympathy. "I'm sorry," I said, unsure if I meant it. "Don't be. You were right about her, right about many things." The next morning, the sky over Chicago was bright and blue, as if the city itself wanted to celebrate with me. Everything in the Rebirth Foundation headquarters was perfect, every detail arranged to convey our message of dignity, renewal, and hope. I arrived early, wanting a moment of quiet before the crowd arrived. I walked slowly through each room, remembering the journey that had brought me here. The walls, once meant to showcase Daniel and Emily's luxury, now stood as a haven for women learning to rise again after devastation. The ceremony began right on time. The spacious living area, now a multi-purpose hall, was packed. I recognized many familiar faces, people who had stood by me through this journey. Linda sat in the front row, elegant, in her teal outfit. Attorney Lawrence stood toward the back, quietly observant, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Rachel and the New Spaces team were by the garden, chatting warmly with guests. I scanned the room and found Daniel leaning against the far wall, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, a far cry from the polished man he used to be. When our eyes met, he gave a slight nod. I returned it, calm and steady. I stepped up to the small podium, strangely at peace. "Every woman here carries invisible scars," I began. "Traces of pain, betrayal, broken dreams. The question isn't whether we get hurt, that's inevitable, but what we choose to do with our wounds." I spoke about rebirth, about turning pain into purpose, about doors that open in the ashes of lost faith. The Rebirth Foundation was born from a deep wound, but I chose to make it a place of healing for others. This isn't just a building. It's a symbol of choice, the choice not to be a victim, but to keep writing your own story. As I spoke, I could feel Daniel's gaze on me, filled with shame, regret, and a touch of admiration. After the ceremony, he came over. His face looked older, with lines of weariness and silver strands in his hair. "It's hard to believe, Mom. You turned something terrible into something extraordinary." "Thank you," I said softly, offering no further words. Between us still lay a gulf of hurt, but somewhere a fragile bridge had begun to form. If I told you I finally understand everything, that I know how deeply I hurt you, would you believe me? Understanding is the first step, Daniel. The first step toward what? Maybe toward yourself becoming a better man. He nodded, his voice low. Did you plan all this from the moment you canceled the apartment transfer? Did you already have this vision in mind? I smiled. No. Back then, I only knew one thing: I wouldn't let anyone make me feel small again. Everything else came one step at a time. A reporter approached, asking for an interview, and Daniel stepped back. "Maybe. We'll talk later," he said. "Maybe," I replied, making no promises. While I was answering the reporter's questions, I saw him slip quietly out of the hall. I didn't know if we would ever truly reconcile. But I realized I wasn't living for revenge anymore. I was living for purpose. That afternoon, after all the guests had left, I went up to the rooftop garden, glowing in the sunset. Linda joined me, leaning lightly against the railing. "Anne, when you told me about Daniel last year, I thought you'd never recover. But look at you now, strong, peaceful, more alive than ever." I smiled. I've learned that the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's using the pain they caused to become someone they never imagined you could be. A year later, the Rebirth Foundation celebrated its first anniversary. There were no reporters or famous guests, only my team and the 32 women who had completed the program. We called them the Reborn. During the small gathering, a 67-year-old woman named Teresa stood to speak. She told us that after her husband died, she discovered he'd left her with nothing but debt and despair. "When I came here, I felt like my life was over," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I thought I was too old, no one would hire me, no one would rent to me, and there was nothing left to start with." She paused, looking straight at me. But Mrs. Ann showed me that even the cruelest betrayals can become gifts if we're brave enough to change. The room erupted in applause. Teresa smiled. "Now I have my own small bakery. I'm debt-free. And most importantly, I've regained my self-respect." As the applause filled the room, my eyes stung with tears. If someone had told me 2 years ago that Daniel's cold message would become the beginning of all this, I would have laughed in disbelief. That evening, after everyone had left, I walked through the Foundation's office. Every room carried its own meaning. The group therapy room with its warm fabric chairs, the creative workshop where women learn to paint, sew, and craft, the legal office, where volunteer lawyers helped them reclaim their rights, the community kitchen filled with the smell of fresh bread and the sound of laughter. I sat in a chair in the rooftop garden, surrounded by plants grown by the women themselves. The city lights shimmered in the distance like stars scattered across the earth. I thought about the past 2 years, the new people, the new challenges, the new life filled with meaning. My phone buzzed. A message from Lawrence. "The meeting with the mayor's office has been confirmed. They're very interested in expanding the Foundation's model. I smiled. If this project succeeded, Rebirth Foundation would reach even more communities. Now, I simply called him Lawrence. Our relationship had grown beyond professional boundaries, starting with casual coffees after meetings, then long conversations that stretched until dusk. I didn't know what was blossoming between us. I only knew that my heart felt alive again after so long. Then came weekend lunches, concerts at the theater, art exhibitions. What we had wasn't a romance in the traditional sense. We both carried too many memories, too many scars. We understood that at our age, the most precious thing was honesty. It was a mature friendship that sometimes crossed into intimacy, but without pressure, without labels, without expectations. "We don't need to define what this is," he once told me, when I hesitated to name what was between us. "Let it be what it is, one day at a time." Those words felt like a soft breeze on my soul. All my life, I had lived within defined roles: daughter, wife, mother, widow. Now, I could simply be myself, without explanation, without apology. The phone rang again. This time, to my surprise, it was Daniel. Since the Rebirth Foundation's opening, we had exchanged only brief, polite messages. 6 months ago, he moved back to Chicago, taking a modest job at a small construction company. Occasionally, he sent greetings, birthday wishes, or shared articles about the foundation. "Mom, I heard you're meeting with the mayor's office tomorrow. I just wanted to wish you luck. I know how important this expansion project is to you." I was a little surprised he knew the information hadn't been made public yet. Perhaps Lawrence had mentioned it. They sometimes crossed paths professionally. I hesitated before replying. Even though the wound had healed, it still left a faint ache. I wasn't sure how to face this version of Daniel, humbler, more self-aware, trying to make amends. "Thank you, son. I truly appreciate that," I texted back. After a few seconds of thought, I added another line. "If everything goes well, we'll need an architect for the new centers, someone who understands the spirit of the foundation." The reply came almost instantly. It would be an honor to contribute, even in a small way. I stared at the screen, flooded with conflicting emotions. Part of me was still cautious, but another part, the mother, wanted to believe my son could change. I set the phone down. Some decisions need time and distance to be made wisely. The meeting with the mayor's office the next day exceeded all expectations. They not only approved plans to open 3 new branches of the Rebirth Foundation in low-income districts, but also proposed developing a citywide program based on our model. "Your approach is very innovative," said the department director, a middle-aged man with bright eyes. "Most women's programs focus on victims of domestic violence or young mothers. You chose to help mature women rebuilding their lives, and the results are remarkable." I left City Hall feeling like I was walking on air. Lawrence walked beside me, smiling. "You deserve this, Anne. This is a turning point. We chose a small Italian restaurant to celebrate." When our glasses of Prosecco clinked together, I suddenly realized how completely my life had changed. 2 years earlier, I had been a woman ignored, valued only for the money I had. Now I sat across from a man who saw me for who I truly was, celebrating an achievement that could change hundreds of lives. "What are you thinking about?" Lawrence asked, noticing my silence. "I'm thinking about how life can completely turn around because of one moment, one decision." He nodded, instantly knowing I meant that fateful morning at the bank. "What I admire most about you," he said, "isn't just that you turned betrayal into something good, but that you did it without letting hate consume you." I smiled. I realized that if I kept feeding resentment, I'd still be letting them control me, even after they were gone. I didn't want to give them that power anymore. After lunch, we walked around the historic downtown area, discussing the next steps. More staff, more volunteers, more funding. I mentioned again that we needed the right architect, and Lawrence asked directly, "Are you considering giving Daniel that chance?" I answered with a soft smile, "I'm considering it. Still not sure." "He's been trying to make things right," Lawrence said. "He's living simply, working hard, and making his payments on time." "Are you ready to trust your son again?" I stopped walking. "I don't know. Maybe forgiveness is a journey, not a destination." Lawrence nodded. "Sometimes giving someone the chance to redeem themselves can save them just as you saved yourself." That night, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the Chicago lights shimmer across the river. I stayed up late, thinking about what he had said. The next morning, I knew what I needed to do. I called Daniel. "Can you come to the foundation this afternoon? I'd like to talk to you about a professional opportunity." "I'll be there," he said, without asking for details. At exactly 3 p.m., he arrived. Punctuality had always been something we shared. Daniel walked into the bright meeting room carrying a folder like a shield. "Thank you for seeing me. Sit down. Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, please." I poured 2 cups, gathering my thoughts. "As you know, the foundation is expanding. We're partnering with the city to open 3 new branches in the suburbs. I read the article this morning." "That's amazing, Mom," he said sincerely. "We need an architect who understands the foundation's spirit, someone who can turn an ordinary space into a place of healing and renewal, someone who can do more with limited resources." Daniel nodded, his eyes lighting up with hope. I continued, "I've thought a lot about this. These buildings must be both practical and symbolic. They need to tell the story of these women from collapse to rebirth." "An inspiring concept," he said, "architecture as a form of storytelling." "Exactly," I replied. "And I want you to lead the project." He froze, his eyes wide, then glistening. I don't know what to say. "This is an opportunity I don't deserve." "It's not about deserving," I said. "If we're being honest, you're right, you don't. But this isn't about that. It's about being the right fit. You have the skills, and most importantly, you understand something few people do, what it means to lose everything and start over from ashes." He bowed his head. I went on. "Of course, there are conditions. You'll work as an independent contractor, reporting directly to Rachel, not me. Your name won't appear in any promotional materials. The focus must be on the women, not the designer." I understand. And I agree to everything. I looked him straight in the eye. "Daniel, this isn't forgiveness. It's a professional opportunity based on your skills and experience. Our relationship is still unresolved." He nodded, his voice low but firm. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. Some bridges, once burned, must be rebuilt brick by brick if they can be rebuilt at all." I saw in Daniel the sincerity of the boy I once raised, not weakness, but honesty. And I thought, maybe, at last, we were both learning to be reborn in our own ways. We spent over an hour discussing the project's logistics. Daniel had prepared an impressive research file on therapeutic architecture and restorative spaces. My son presented creative ideas to optimize resources while keeping both quality and emotional value in every room. When the meeting ended and he was about to leave, Daniel paused. "Mom, can I ask something personal?" I nodded slightly. "Go ahead." He looked at me for a long moment and asked, Do you regret canceling that transfer? I mean, if you'd just given me the money to buy the apartment and kept the illusion of a normal family, maybe it would have been easier for you." His question stunned me. I had never asked myself that before. After a few seconds of silence, I replied slowly, "No, Daniel, I don't regret it. I'm sad that our relationship broke, sad that you chose to betray me in that way, sad that we both suffered. But I don't regret the decision I made that morning at the bank. That was the first time in my life I truly chose to love myself." Daniel nodded, his eyes downcast. "Thank you for being honest, and for this chance." After he left, I sat in silence, reflecting on our conversation. The road ahead was still long for the Rebirth Foundation and for any hope of reconciliation between us. But I believed, as he had said himself, that maybe things really could be rebuilt, one brick at a time. That evening, over dinner with Lawrence at my apartment, I told him about my decision. He smiled, pouring more wine. "I think you made the right choice for the foundation, and maybe for both of you." I nodded softly. "Maybe. Time will tell." Lawrence looked at me with warmth. "What I admire most about you, Anne, is your ability to turn endings into beginnings." I smiled. Over the past 2 years, my life had turned a page from pain to purpose, from betrayal to transformation, from the end of one chapter to the start of another, more honest and complete one. Daniel's message that year, the one disinviting me from his wife's birthday dinner, sent just as I was about to transfer all my savings to buy them an apartment, should have been just another humiliation in a long line of hurts. But instead, it became the turning point that woke me up. The real revenge wasn't making Daniel or Emily suffer, though I admit there were moments when watching them face consequences brought some satisfaction. The real revenge was becoming the woman they never believed I could be. I turned the apartment that was supposed to symbolize their status into a center that helps women rebuild their lives. I turned the money they stole from me into funding for new beginnings. That was the sweetest revenge, realizing that, in my 60s, my life was far from over, and the most meaningful chapters had only just begun. Now, at 64, I can say that the past 3 years have been the most transformative of my life. It all began with that cruel message, "Mom, you're not invited. My wife doesn't want you there." Those words broke my heart, but they also opened my eyes. I realized I had been nothing more than a walking wallet, needed only when money was involved. That day, at the bank branch, I looked at the computer screen and canceled the transfer. I had no idea that decision would expose years of secret withdrawals Daniel had made from my accounts. I couldn't have imagined that the victim would become the author of her own story, or that from those ashes, something like the Rebirth Foundation would emerge. Life is strange. What was once meant to be a luxury apartment for my son and his wife is now the heart of a foundation that helps middle-aged women rebuild their lives. The company Emily built with my stolen money now helps sponsor our community design projects focused on humane architecture. Every brick in the foundation, every smile of a woman we've helped, every new center opened in a struggling neighborhood, all of it is a louder answer than any act of retaliation. My relationship with Daniel is still under reconstruction. There are no miracles, and forgiveness hasn't fully come. Some wounds take a long time to heal, if they ever do. But there is room for hope, for rebuilding, step by step, brick by brick, just as he said. Daniel's contributions to the Foundation's architectural projects have been admirable. I can see real change in him. Emily left when she realized there was no more wealth or status to cling to, just as I once predicted. As for me, I've discovered parts of myself I never knew. Anne, the leader, the visionary, the woman who can stand before a crowd and inspire. Anne, the 64-year-old woman in a mature, mutual relationship with Lawrence, free of labels, filled with peace. And Anne, the woman who finally understands that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's the foundation of every other kind of love. If you're listening to this story and see a piece of yourself in it, if you've ever been used, dismissed, or pushed aside by those who should have valued you, I want you to remember this. It's never too late to start again. It's never too late to say no to disrespect and yes to yourself. You may not start a foundation like I did, but I promise that the moment you put your dignity first, something miraculous will happen. Doors you never knew existed will open. Genuine people will appear. And one day, you'll realize that maybe the best chapters of your life are still waiting ahead. Telling this story hasn't been easy. I've had to touch old wounds, relive pain I thought had faded. But I share it because I know there are many women out there like me, women who once confused sacrifice with love, who thought their worth had expired. To every one of you listening, I want to say, your story isn't over. That period at the end of your sentence is just the beginning of a new chapter, one that might be deeper than anything you've written before. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a turning point that made you rethink how you love, live, or treat yourself? Share your story in the comments, because your words might be the light someone else needs to find their way. And if you'd like to keep walking this journey with me, where every story is a lesson and every pain an opportunity to grow, stay with us and listen to the next chapters together. Because sometimes the most beautiful things only begin when we dare to rewrite our own lives.